All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. We're super excited to have Camp Verde head football coach Aaron Gronwald on today as we enjoy the conference championship weekend here of football and bask in the afterglow of the national championship game, which was certainly pretty enjoyable. The coaching Twitter world was abuzz with Chip Kelly busting out some 13 personnel, excuse me, not 13 personnel, but some insert duo, misdirection duo there. Popped that a few times. I know I very much enjoyed the Irish's first drive with, I think, 8 or 9 quarterback runs. That was right up my alley, but unfortunately, they couldn't keep it going, but fought valiantly to get back in the game. So it was an entertaining national championship game, even if it appears as though early indications the ratings were not quite what they desired. But I thought all in all it was a very exciting college football playoff. I have enjoyed my weekend, as I hope you listeners have as well. If you haven't followed Ian Tatum, who is a coach, he's on Twitter, a couple other places. He did a fantastic O-line clinic online yesterday, a whole bunch of speakers. I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed, and I know, Coach Brusso, you have a boy, so I'm sure all the fathers of with sons will disagree with me, but this weekend I had a little double daddy-daughter date, and for my money, there are few things in the world better than a daddy-daughter date. Saw Mufasa, which was it was very good. I really enjoyed it, and even the kindergartner did. Madeline enjoyed it too. So it was a great weekend. I hope everybody out there listening is having a good weekend. Like I said, we're super excited to have Coach Gronwald on the show. He has compiled a sterling 26-9 record as the head football coach at Camp Verde High School, including 3 state playoff appearances, 2 state quarterfinal appearances, and 1 region championship. Also coached at the storied program TF Riggs in South Dakota. Been a part of state championship staffs, played collegiately at Dakota State as well. So we're really excited to have him on the broadcast. Got to coach with him 1 year. He's a wealth of knowledge, and we're looking forward to diving in here and talking a little more program building with him. And this episode will get out to as many folks as possible. If you could, please, this is my plea here, like and subscribe to the show if you can. It's absolutely free. Helps us reach as many coaches as possible. And I know typically when somebody says that and I'm watching it, I don't subscribe. So I'm asking you to please subscribe. I now have started doing that as we're trying to build our audience and get more people onto the show and talk ball. I know our first few episodes here I've greatly enjoyed. I've been looking forward to this one a lot as well. So, Coach Gronwald, thank you so much for being with us, and we're excited to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks, Coach. I'm really excited about it. I appreciate you guys having me.
Coach Brusso, any thoughts on the NFL playoffs, national championship game?
It's just that, well, first off, thank you, Coach, for coming on. It's nice to get to kind of meet and talk with some of the guys that have been at Prescott that I never got to meet or work with, so it's kind of fun to kind of catch up in this way with Coach Kirsty and Pryor, now you. It's that time of the year where, like, you're excited for the football games because obviously there's more at stake and, the season's led to this, but you're kind of sad because it's going away soon. So it's kind of that bittersweet. But spring ball is picking up here soon, which is just something to look forward to. National championship was fun. The spread ended up being pretty spot on, which was surprisingly unsurprising, but also sad. But it was a great game to watch, and the Irish fought hard, which, just happy they were there, and you can't complain too much about how the heart they showed in the second half. And then hopefully today we'll have some good games, and then the fiesta that is the Super Bowl.
As always very exciting. I think the Irish are in good hands with Marcus Freeman leading the charge, one of the best coaches in college football, no question, although, and admittedly, I'm a Sun Devil homer, I was a little disappointed that Kenny Dillingham didn't win one Coach of the Year award. I find that to be a little bit preposterous. But again, I'm a Sun Devil homer, so maybe I'm not being objective in that regard, but I think the job he's done at Arizona State was certainly miraculous. So really excited about their future as well. And while the football season is coming to an end here in a few weeks, I really personally enjoy the UFL, XFL, whatever they're being called at this moment. The one of the reasons I think it's super exciting is I think a lot of times for high school coaches, it can be even more pertinent because those guys are putting in a system in 3-4 weeks and playing a game. So a lot of times it's not quite as John Gruden-esque where there's a 14 word play call, and they're putting in some stuff that is a little more applicable to the high school game with tags and different things like that. So I know I look forward to those spring games, and we'll be looking forward to them as well. Coach G, you have any thoughts on the national championship game or the exciting conference championships that await?
Yeah, I didn't get to watch all of the national championship. Got to watch it on and off, but with the little girls here watching other shows at the same time. But I was happy to see that they did keep it competitive. Especially with this 12-team playoff. Maybe we got to look at a little bit different on who's getting the 1, 2, 3, 4 seed. But I definitely think it was the right call expanding this and getting to see some other teams have a shot and come down to it. And we get an 8-point game at the end of all of it there. So still pretty exciting there. And, same thing with the NFL. Look, conference championships look a little bit different this year in the NFL. So that's kind of exciting just to see who's going to come out of that too.
I've enjoyed watching the Commanders. They run an offense that you'll see a lot more stuff that you see in college you don't necessarily see in the collegiate game. And Jaden Daniels has certainly been impressive, although in the early going here, looks like Saquon Barkley's been having his way in the Eagles, but this should be a good one. I think it's going to end up being a good one, and of course, everybody is looking forward to Chiefs-Bills this evening. I think that should be a good one as well also. All right, well, we are going to dive into the topic, which we are on episode 4 of Program Building, so hopefully our audience here is still enjoying this. I know I have really enjoyed seeing some of the differences the coaches have had and how they go about building programs, and certainly there's been more than a few similarities, which I kind of thought we would see based on these successful coaches building a program. Coach Gronwald, obviously you've done a fantastic job at Camp Verde, reviving them, so to speak, and really it was I don't want to say a complete rebuild because they had a solid team before, but what you guys have done, kind of putting in a completely new system and different things like that, has been really exciting to watch, and just seeing the growth of that program over the course of the last 3 years has been exciting for me to watch, and you guys have certainly done a fantastic job. I know you have one of the better, I believe, returning quarterbacks in 2A next year, and certainly with everything you guys do and your outstanding offensive coordinator, great job you do on defense, there'll be a team to watch this year. But we're going to attack this like we have the last couple of weeks, and this is fairly recent for you, obviously, because this kind of just happened about 3 years ago. But we're going to attack it from you've just gotten the job. Now what? What are your first steps in trying to get everything implemented? And you've just been hired, and what do you do?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate all that too, by the way. I think a big part of that, as far as what you do immediately next, depends on the timing. For me, I felt really fortunate at the timing of it. It all kind of happened around February, mid-February, early March. So at that point, there's no rush to throw in a system, figure out what you got for players and all that time. I have time to evaluate all those things. So in my situation, the first thing, which kind of happened, before actually accepting the job, from the interview to the acceptance of the position, was, thinking about a staff. With having the time for it, staff building was the biggest thing. I got a lot of advice from people around there, one of them being Barry Tolley at Prescott High School. And he was like, one of the biggest things is don't go over there unless you feel like you've got somebody you can take with you. If you're going to build a program, you kind of need somebody that you can already trust coming out the gate. So that was the biggest thing. Look for a couple guys. I think Cody Colville was one of those guys I wanted to bring on over with me. Had built a relationship with him, knew him from high school, coached with him a little bit under you. Liked his philosophy, liked the way he coached the boys, and knew that, if I had somebody like that, I could put him on one side of the ball and put my focus on the other one. So anyway, that didn't work out. Go from there, end up getting my staff. And then again, having the time, mid-March for me, we don't even do our spring ball until late April, because I have so many of my guys at the 2A level that are running track or playing baseball. And, if I do spring ball too early in the spring, I have 15 guys, and a lot of those guys are probably JV guys coming into the next season. Most of my guys that are going to make an impact in the next season are playing other sports. So, again, I had the time, go over, meet the players, set up that schedule, set the expectations. Here's what it looks like. Here's what you're expected to be at when. Um, kind of once you get that flow, again, I had that time. So it's like, all right, we got 2 weeks now. We're going to set up weight room workouts, but I can only get over here. At the time, I was still coaching baseball at Prescott. So there was the balance of I still got to finish my commitment to this other coaching position I had. But this isn't something where I could take this job in March and not go be around my players and be in the weight room, be doing competitive events with these guys until June, July, and make it happen. So that balance of that, fortunately, I had some coaches in that area that could run the weight room on days that I couldn't pop over there. But yeah, as far as getting it at that point in the year, then it's like by summertime, you've already got the relationship with the kids. They already know what to expect. They already know what kind of schedule you're going into. And I got to be honest, it felt like going into the summer, it didn't feel as new as I expected it to getting the job. It felt like we had a little bit better of a routine and closer to a year 2, year 3 rolling into a summer with the program.
I know that was one of the things I was really excited about in hearing this and talking last week. We had on a 6A coach, and obviously there's a huge difference in the size of schools and how you go about attacking it at the 2A level. And I know we've had you guys over for 7-on-7. I know several coaches have always remarked, oh my goodness gracious, they've had such good numbers in their summer program, because I don't believe that happened before. And that was certainly something that you guys did an outstanding job of building. But I think hearing the difference in the 2A program up to the 6A program and all the levels in between, and there's certain challenges that are at different programs that are not at other ones. I think it's being at a 4A school. I know we obviously have to share athletes, and I want to share athletes. I think a kid, if they're good enough to be on a team, they should be competing. And I always like to see like-minded guys encouraging kids to have the best high school experience they can possibly have. So exciting hearing about how you built that. Coach Brousseau, some thoughts on that?
Sure. Coach, did you have any prior connection or anyone you knew in the area in Camp Verde at all, or did you come in kind of fresh and clean?
Yeah, no, actually that was a big part of it. This whole thing just kind of, was much more than a coincidence to me the way it worked out. I actually, when I moved back from South Carolina in 2020, actually, crazy story, I actually got a job. Bob Young had taken the strength and conditioning PE job at Camp Verde in the spring of 2020. And then everything happened at Bradshaw, and Bob Young and I end up being the finalists for that job. He ends up getting the Bradshaw job, obviously, gives me a call, wondering if I want to help out. And, we had just moved back. My wife and I are pregnant with our youngest right now, our second one. And I was like, I'd love to coach, but right now I don't have a teaching position, and that's what's got to pay the bills, all this. He's like, figured you might say that. I just kind of left Camp Verde high and dry over there with that position, and sounds like it might be a good fit for you if you're interested, And so that was the end of it. He got me in touch with Rick Walsworth, who was the head coach at the time, and Mark Showers, the principals. And I think within 2-3 days, I had gone over there, interviewed, and got the job. And so I had coached some of these boys that I was coming into this program to take over. At the time, I had coached with the previous head coach, who, funny story, his son is actually that quarterback you're talking about, who we are really excited about rolling into this year. But anyway, yeah, I had some connections over there. Same athletic director, same head coach, head principal. And then a couple of my assistants were actually assistants with me on that staff back in 2020. So.
Well, like I said, I know you guys have done a fantastic job. Interesting little side note there. We're a few episodes away from getting into the offensive systems episode. Were there any challenges? Those of you that don't know, they went from a flex bone offense that had definitely been very successful to a bit of an air raid system, end zone air raid system. We're excited. I know your offense coordinator has done a fantastic job. He's a quarterback guru, so to speak. Were there any challenges in bringing that different style, or were the kids excited about that? Obviously, I think I personally am of the belief that absolutely any offensive system can work, because I've watched Coconino go from a so-so average team running the spread to a powerhouse running the double wing. But so I think it's a little bit more than just the system. But were there any challenges, any differences in that and bringing that system to Camp Verde, and how was that process?
Yeah, no, first of all, I definitely agree. I think any system can work. Like I said, I coached under that Flexbone system prior to it, and I'd seen success with it. So I agree with that completely. But I'd say the most difficult part was probably just the expansion of what they were expected to know in terms of an offensive playbook. But like you said, the excitement was high coming in with that, and clearly right out the gate, first couple games, what we end up doing on the scoreboard just continued to build that excitement. And so now moving into year 3, it's just something that, we do our youth camps in the summer. These kids, we are pretty much into our youth programs where they're running what we're running on both sides of the ball. And so these kids expect to run that when they get up to us, and it's something that still has a high level of excitement. So again, the toughest part would be the fact that it just was an expansion of what they needed to know offensively.
I think that's really, really impressive because I know I've been at Prescott for a long time. It can be very difficult. I'm of the belief that sometimes that's certainly important, but the fact that you have your youth programs in there incorporating your system and learning it, I think it's huge. All the best programs in the state do that. I know the team that we have run into the last 2 out of 3 years in the quarterfinals has their guys doing very similar stuff. Snowflake has got their guys locked into that program. I've seen a couple of your guys' youth teams. You guys have good, solid teams. So that's really, really exciting that you were able to implement that and get that going right away, because that can be a challenge, trying to build that from the ground up, so to speak, and really put roots in and build your system from there. So the fact that you guys have got that incorporated really speaks to the culture you've built in such a short time. Coach Prusso?
No, I think that's huge. I mean, me personally, that was growing up through youth here in Prescott and then to the high school, whatnot. Like, it just makes such an impression on you and creates such a thread and connection. So, that's big. And the fact that you guys have that, the whole communal buy-in is huge. Um, how did having those connections prior help you in terms of getting things kickstarted? You mentioned having to travel back and forth in the springtime between Prescott and Camp Verde still. Connections not only with the adults but the kids as well. And how did that, you feel like, help catapult you to success off the bat?
Yeah. One of them, just to piggyback off what we were just talking about as far as the youth program, that's essentially why it was so easy for us to get in with the youth program. One of my current assistants works with offensive and defensive line. He was running the youth program for the last 15 plus years, maybe 20 or so. And finally, this season was the first season he actually stepped away from that. So, we're fortunate to have him over full time. He was leaving practice every day about 5 to head down to youth practices. But we know, we lost a good solid head down there, but we're still in great connection, great relationship with the current head of that youth program. So that's one of the connections right there. But I wasn't just an assistant coach first time around. You mentioned adults and kids, so there's some with the adults, but I was actually a PE teacher. So I have currently this last group of guys that graduated were kids that I had as freshmen in PE. So I had already built relationships with these guys. I had coached a lot of them in football that year. And we just spent a lot of time with them because of having them in the classroom at the same time. So we built that relationship. We talked sports, we talked football. And so coming back, there was already that excitement. I remember the conversations we used to have with them. They remembered it, and it kind of just like, all right, we're all excited about what this is going to look like moving forward. So,
one of the things I thought was really exciting about having you on, Coach, is you have such a varied experience coaching in, I believe, 3 or 4 different states at this point. Have you noticed any difference in style of play and different things as related to, I know you were in South Carolina, you said, South Dakota, and of course, Arizona. What have you noticed about coaching in different parts of the country, if anything?
no, there's a lot. I'll tell you, the biggest thing is some of the things you think are only going to happen in some places, that is everywhere, and it can go a wide range from stuff happening in the classroom to on the field and everything. And the other thing I'll tell you is there are straight up dogs everywhere you go. I've coached players on this Camp Verde team that I would put up against some of the best players that I've coached in other parts of the country, and you mentioned like TF Riggs being over there. Their backup quarterback, or one of their backup quarterbacks at Ohio State that just won a national championship, played at TF Riggs. So those are the type of kids over there that we had and down in South Carolina and Marlboro County. But I'm telling you, the one thing I've noticed is there are dogs across the country, no matter where you go. So football, high school football is in good shape, believe it or not.
That's really exciting to hear. I know, like I said, I've gotten on and watched some film on TF Riggs and some different stuff. They do some really, really cool things formationally and some different stuff there that I know is very exciting and enjoyed following them. And interesting to hear that perspective on different parts of the country and things of that nature with the high school game. Coach Brusso?
Yeah, I think that's great, and I really love how you've been able to obviously take that and implement that in Camp Verde, which at least growing up around here wasn't, at least from my memory, I could be mistaken, but wasn't a super powerhouse program. But you guys have obviously been really successful, and I think it's cool how you're able to implement all those things at the 2A level specifically, and just it sounds like you've just been able to elevate everything there. So kudos to you.
Appreciate that, coach. We're trying, and it takes an army, but we appreciate that.
Absolutely, it definitely does. And we talked a little bit about building a staff, putting in a system. Interesting, really difficult to develop the kind of continuity you said you had for a guy at the youth level for 15 years is almost unheard of. I know that tends to be a position there's a lot of turnover because there can be sometimes drama and different things at that level. So the fact that you guys had that kind of continuity certainly was a good starting point to have. Coach, I know you've been a 3-3 guy on defense. Let me ask you, when you were heading to Camp Verde, was that something you were definitely going to run because it's what you believe in the most, or were you going to develop your system based on your athletes, or what was the thinking there when you were thinking about installing your 3-3 or just installing a defensive system in general?
Yeah, no, matter of fact, I'm actually a bigger fan of the 4-2-5, and I think that comes, mostly from that was what we played 3 of my 4 years in college. So I got to love that and helped coach a little bit up there. So I think that's where the love for that came from. I think the 3-3, especially the style that we're doing it, is very similar as far as personnel. But yeah, my whole thing was, like you said, evaluate the personnel first of all, see what kind of guys you got to play what kind of defense. But we go back to the previous connections and having been over here in 2020, Coach Walsworth actually wanted to install the 3-3. So myself and the other defensive coordinator over there at the time were drawing stuff up. So I had already had a little bit of work drawing it up. We ran it that year. So when I got the job coming back over there, again, like you said, I wasn't sure as far as building the staff. At one point I was thinking I was going to have to be calling the offense because I thought the guy that I could get that was going to be my right-hand man, initially out the gate was going to be a defensive guy. And so I was trying to prepare for that at the same time. End up getting in touch with Coach Buck, my offensive coordinator that you've mentioned, as a recommendation from my current principals, because he's actually a Camp Verde alum. And my biggest thing was I want to do the air raid. I want to just get the ball out there. We're going to go for it all the time. And he was all about it, has a ton of experience with it. So I was like, this is perfect. Let's go with you. I'm going to focus on the defense. And then it went to, like I said, they were previously running the 3-3 over there. I had spent some time drawing some stuff up. And again, go back to the fact that, it's early March that I'm getting this position. I spent some more time and just built on what I had already been drawing up a couple years prior in that 3-3. So that's kind of how that decision went. And we've built so much on it. I got Coach Jorgensen, Ronnie, my guy that I've talked to you about for the D-line last year. And we have just expanded so much on that 3-3 now where I'm like, this is kind of what I'm married to at this point.
Let me ask you this, Coach. I was writing down some notes there as you were talking. When we're talking about, I've heard different guys say this, and I've followed different people, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that. If you're running the 3-3 or the 4-2-5, I've heard a lot of guys, specifically really about the 4-2-5, talk about your free safety, that guy that's in the middle of the field, not those down safeties or different things like that, really, really has to be a player. Obviously, when you're talking about air raid, I think most people are going to say the signal caller, the quarterback's the most important position. But 4-2-5 or 3-3, what's the most important position you have to kind of make that defense go? And is it different? Is it different in the 4-2-5 compared to the 3-3?
I think you're going to get different answers from different coaches, because we're all doing this different ways. Our brains all see this thing differently. I think you're absolutely right in that 4-2-5. The biggest thing with what I'm doing in my 3-3 and that 4-2-5, I don't have that free safety right now. So for me, the more important things are those overhang players, which what we're calling hybrids. And we have moved recently to playing them more at like an 8-yard depth where we're kind of looking like a 3 high. But they're the most important because they have to be able to play that. We do a lot of different things with those guys. Some things that a lot of guys would probably say are unorthodox too. So those guys for me have to be extremely athletic, as far as speed wise, but they also have to be physical enough to make plays on anybody that could be carrying the ball. So that, and the other thing for me, I think it all comes down to, we don't really have, if we tried to throw 4 linemen out there with what we have right now as far as our guys and our personnel, it just wouldn't be, we would be at a disadvantage to what we're doing when we put our best 3 linemen out there. Our defensive front this year with the 3 that we're going to roll out there are going to be very solid. I think it's going to be like, you're going to need to be able to throw the ball against us still. And I don't know that we'd get the same look if we rolled out a 4-2 with the guys that we have. So for me, it's that, what can you do with your front 3 or 4, depending on if you're going to be the 3-3 or the 4. And then again, like I said, my overhang guys just have to be so athletic in our defense.
We've been we did a lot of 3-3 last year. Coach Brusso is taking over as our defensive coordinator, doing some things differently with the 3-3. And this is a question that I'm gonna pose to both of you. I'll start with Coach Brusso first, and I'm curious to hear your guys' perspective on this, because I know Coach Brusso kind of lends himself into simple is better. It's talked about when they were at Casa Grande, won the state championship, they carried 1 coverage, and I believe he's very much into a simplistic type of coverage philosophy. And Coach Brusso, I know you've talked about 1 to 2 coverages. What do you think in terms of that? Why is that an advantage? And why do you think that's so important in implementing your system?
Well, for starters, I think whatever you do, your guys have to be able to do it well. And then most head coaches, all the head coaches I've been a part of, have been primary offensive guys. And usually, whatever your head coach focuses on gets more time in the day. And that's not a bad thing. That's just it is what it is. So as a defensive guy, you got to really think, how can I, excuse me, how do I get the most value out of the time that I do have? And I've always just found, if you're really good at 1 or 2 things, that can take you so much farther than being average or okay at 5 or 6. That year the year you mentioned in Casa Grande, that made a huge imprint on me, just because we weren't overly complicated, but we were really good at what we did. Obviously, we had fantastic kids there. That was the main thing. But just being simple to let the kids not think, get out of their own way, just play fast, react, and be aggressive, to me was super helpful. And then once you really build in that foundation and that structure is, just set in, and they don't have to think about, this is what we do, this is how we do it. Then from there, I love adding on little layers of things and trying to get value out of taking what you have as your base and then just adding a small tweak to present something new, but maybe it's not, different or unfamiliar to the kids. Where even sometimes I try to think of it as, I want them to do stuff that is totally different and not like what our base is, but I don't want them to know they're doing that. I want them to think we're running the exact same thing all the time, but we as coaches are moving those pieces on the chessboard, and they don't have to worry about that. That's my job. They can just go play.
So, Coach G, I'm going to pose it to you here. How many coverages do you carry, and why? And how do you pick what's going to be your base coverage?
Yeah, we got, as far as week to week, as like what's on the play card going into every Friday, I would say probably at least 6, depending on what we're running out of the different variations. Because we have, we've got our cover 1, our cover 0, our 2, our 3, but we have variations out of all of them. So that, and then going back to the other part of the question, it's all dependent on what we see in film. We're big, you and I talked about it a lot when I coached with you. We're big on film study, seeing what they're going to do, diagnosing our film, what we're bad at. Like for instance, this year for us, we were terrible at triggering on screens, which is something we haven't been bad at the last couple of years. It'd be, like clear as day, the screen's coming, we're sitting back, end up getting blocked because of it. That and things like we had a freshman corner start all year. We know they're going to take shots. Freshman corner who is underdeveloped as far as his athleticism. He's got a lot of growing to do. He's going to be a monster in the future, but we knew there were going to be shots taken at him. So for us, it came down to what are we doing poorly right now on the film? What in their scheme do they do that is going to be able to attack what we're doing poorly? And then which coverage do we want to roll into with this? And then obviously you get into the down and distance type stuff too. I'm a big man coverage guy if you've got the guys to do it, especially when you get to those longer 100% passing downs. So
interesting perspective. I always enjoy hearing guys' different perspectives on different things. I think one of the most important things, and I've talked about this with all our guests, football is such a great game, but there are multiple ways you can be successful. Definitely a lot of different ways to do things, and I enjoy hearing guys' different perspectives and differing perspectives on what they do to establish that in their program. Let me ask you, in related to that film study, and this is a little bit, what do you guys see more of in the 2A level? One of the things that's interesting is I was talking to Coach McDonald last week about offenses in 6A, and I was talking about some of the offenses that always give us trouble, and one of those is the wing T. It can be such a bear to stop, and the flex bone, I think, is one of the hardest offenses to stop. All of them offer different things. All of them have different strengths and different things like that. But have you noticed, and what I was going to say is the interesting thing that he said, is the wing T even a thing in 6A in Arizona? He said no, because there's so many schools everywhere. You would have difficulty getting a quarterback to go there if you were running that and what have you. But have you seen a difference in schemes from the 2A level to some of the higher levels you've been at in other areas of the country or other parts of Arizona?
Surprisingly enough, you see everything in 2A. Even just in our regular schedule, between our region and freedom games and all that type of stuff, we're seeing everything from, like you said, the flex bone, the triple option. We see, we've got Cortez in our region who typically runs the triple option very, very well. I mean, a team that we've been able to put a lot of points on lately, but they've been tough to keep off of the scoreboard in the last few years because it's as simple as, if you're not disciplined on defense, they're going to bust one. But then you've got things like, Arizona Lutheran, who runs one of the best wing tees, like double wing I've actually seen. I mean, they're so good at it. They run it at their youth level. They've been doing it forever.
I've seen some of their film.
They're so hard to stop. It's just, I mean, you can do everything. You can throw everything at them, and you can execute what you're trying to do against them, and they will still have big plays against you. And then you go in, and you got guys like Tonopah Valley, who we scrimmage every year. And Coach Davis down there runs the heck out of the run and shoot, and they do it very well, and they're really difficult to stop. So the thing for us is Coach Brusso, we have weeks we got one coverage in. We're playing Arizona Lutheran. It's as simple as, you three guys sit back here and make sure you don't get beat deep on those 7 times they throw the ball. And somehow it still happens, But we get a little bit of everything in that 2A.
Nature of the beast.
Makes it pretty exciting and definitely pretty challenging. I know sometimes one of the things I like about 4A is we see a variety of offenses. It's interesting to hear that kind of a little homogenized at maybe the higher levels. Everybody's running a spread, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's interesting to hear perspectives on how you stop different deep offenses and things like that. Coach Brusso, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, this ties in and kind of the inverse of, we talked a little bit about defensive philosophy and development there. But being down in 6A and 4A and just the southern part of the state, the biggest difference I've noticed down there and up here is just the ability to throw the ball in the passing games, where I feel like up here it's really not as developed at large. Obviously, you have different examples. And then you guys being at such a small school in 2A, in Phoenix, kids have access to, quarterback camps and specific training, and they'll have individual trainers and whatnot. And then obviously running the air raid, it's super crucial for your quarterback to be able to obviously throw the ball, read coverages, dissect things. How do you guys go about developing that in just a different kind of environment and place than somewhere like Phoenix, where you might have an abundance of resources?
Yeah, that's a real good question. And the thing is, the beauty of it for us is that's my OC. That's Coach Buck right there. He is the guy. He actually has recently started his own quarterback training company with the Black Flag Quarterback Academy. But, he's done it. He's been running this air raid. He ran it in Southern California for, 10 plus years. He's been doing it at Flagstaff out here. He's the guy. And for us, when we first had it, our quarterback that broke all those records was his son. So he had been underneath him for a long time. But he's right there in town, and our boys have no problem getting out there with him. But that's really, without that, it's got to be, we've got to have our coaches willing to put in the time with these kids. And the kids have got to be willing to come do it. Because like you said, there's not the same resources out there. You can't just walk in somewhere or Google real quick and find somebody that'll give you some good training and get that done right there. So that's the tougher part. And we don't have a ton of staff. We don't have the ability to pay a bunch of staff. So we've got guys doing it for the right reasons, which is awesome. But that means they're willing to put in the work. We just got to have the kids do it. And that's, I would say that's been a testament the last couple of years is our kids have put in that work, which is not always easy to find in my experience in high school football nowadays, as far as kids wanting to put in that time that they don't necessarily have to.
Sure. How have you been able to create such buy-in, not just offensively, but defensively, program-wide?
That's a good question. I just think that we're doing things the right way. Like I said, it takes an army. I think I've got the best staff in the state, not just 2A, as far as the type of guys. And I've got 6-7 guys on my staff. We have 3 of those 6 guys that have college football experience. So we've got a little bit of that knowledge there, with 10 plus years of high school coaching experience for each of those 3 guys. So it's easy for the kids to see that we do know what we're talking about. So as far as the buy-in, as far as football IQ and just the knowledge of the game, that's there. It's hard for them to question. But like I said, I've got really good guys on my staff that have been doing it at the high school level and the youth level for a long time, and they know how to build those relationships. And I think that's more important than the knowledge side of it in some instances, especially nowadays. So the kids want to be there. They want to be around each other. They want to be around the coaches. My coaches want to be around each other. So it's really just our culture and our environment, I think, that has bought this buy-in. And then once you have that, the kids want to win. So once we've taken care of that culture and that environment, now it's like, okay, what do we got to do to win? And then they bought into whatever scheme you're trying to do.
I know. I thought it was interesting. I heard some old footage of Coach Leach talking about. He was comparing their air raid system to the wishbone, which is not something you would think you would hear a lot. But he basically said their idea was to get the ball to as many playmakers as possible. 5 receivers. They were passing the ball all the time. And the wishbone obviously was running the ball all the time. But the point was to spread the ball around. And of course, I know a lot of air raiders love the Mike Leach quote of balance, where he says 50% run and 50% pass is 100% stupid or something like that. But the idea being to spread the ball around to your playmakers in different spots, I think is certainly interesting. One of the things every time I have coaches on, I always like to hear about your practice plans. How many periods, how long, how do you guys go about building a practice? Obviously at the 2A level, I'm assuming you have to have guys working things both ways. They have to have offensive and defensive stuff, which is a luxury that some of the 6A schools have, being able to do a platoon system. I don't imagine that happens in 2A, but what does a typical practice plan look like for you? And if you could do us a favor and talk about it in terms of your installation process, what do your practice plans look like? And in terms of in a game week, in a typical game week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leading into that Friday ball game.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, we have a very specific routine that we only break when it's a necessity. We're as far as just the practice outlook, let's say once we get into the season, as far as camp goes, like what is it going to be, July 28th this year or something, we get to hit the ground running. That'll be 2-a-days for us, 2 weeks worth of that, get through it. And then once we're into the season, we start our regular season. Mondays for us is all film and install. We don't hit the field unless it's maybe week 1, 2, or 3 early on, and we're trying to walk through something new that is a wrinkle we're putting in for that specific team. But we're typically there till about 5:36 on Mondays, but it's all our game film from Friday night, or obviously week one, just opponent, but our game film, what are we going to fix? Then opponent game film, what's our game plan, all that type of stuff. That's Monday. We very, very seldom hit the field on Mondays, maybe sometimes for some conditioning, or depending on bye week, which I don't even know if we get one of those this year. So that's Mondays for us. Tuesday, we go full pad. We are 2 hours. So, 5-minute periods, but everything we do is basically 10 to 20-minute blocks. Our individual time, our group work is all usually 10-minute blocks. Then we move on, and then we get into the team stuff. It's usually like 20-minute periods or 25, but switching it up between, field zones and all that type of stuff for offense. But Tuesday is full go. We're going to have a tackle circuit on Tuesdays, or we're going to have a turnover circuit. A lot of Tuesdays we're going to have both. I'm a firm believer in if you don't tackle live during the week, you're not going to tackle on Friday night. So we have to do that once a week. We're very cautious about it when we get into the live reps, as far as team reps or 7-on-7 and those types of things, quick whistle, all that. But I just, in my experience in the 10 years, every time I've been a part of a team that doesn't tackle in practice during the week, once the season starts, we typically don't tackle well on Friday night. So Tuesdays, we get after it. We go pretty hard on Tuesdays. Wednesdays, we are just shells, helmets, shoulder pads, and it's still a 2-hour practice. Very similar style, except for maybe instead of inside run defensively, we're doing 7-on-7 today since we're not full pads. Offense is typically run review on Mondays, install the new stuff for the next period. And then it's, team open field script. And then Wednesdays is different field zones, all that type of stuff. So just the different types there, same amount of time for practice, same amount of periods, basically same branching off into different groups. And then Thursdays, we're pro style. We're just helmets. We are, Coach Bucks gets out there, runs the offense through basically our first 10 plays that we want to script for Friday night. We throw some wrinkles in there. We work a few trick plays here and there. We talk about it. Maybe we end up with 12 or 13 plays on that first script because of talking with the boys out there. It's a very slow, 20 to 30 minutes. Everybody that's not in is on the sideline locked in. The coaches and the first team offense are out there. Our running backs that are getting reps, our receivers that'll see reps are out there, and we're all talking after each play. Basically really creating what we're going to come out with, how we're going to start that game on Friday night. And then it's clean, crisp, running through a few reps of all our special teams, and then we put the hay in the barn and we're good to go for the week. So that's what our weeks look like once we get into the season.
As far as your install schedule in camp, how do you go about doing that? I know a lot of air raiders are a 3-day install, and how does your install differ from both offensively and defensively?
Yeah, pretty much it is a 3-day install for the most part, that we basically install twice over the course of our fall camp week. So, and again, we're doing the same. We install in spring ball the same way we do in fall camp. So our spring ball practices coming out here, we'll start, at least half an hour, depending on what the goal is for that install. Maybe we spread out that 3 days into 6 days over spring ball or whatever it is. But same install again. We're starting with just our quick game passes, our basic inside zone type stuff. For the install for offense, the blocking schemes there, and those quick passing routes as far as the receivers. Day 2, then you're moving into basically screen game, RPOs in the run game. And then we're moving on to the puller type stuff, the counters, the powers, all that type of stuff. Our multiple personnels, where we're not just that air raid 10 personnel in that day 3 and day 4 area. And then as far as offense goes, when we get into those, the 2-a-days and the 2 weeks, we basically reinstall everything. With a little bit, when we reinstall day 1, it's basically like day 1 and a half of day 2. Just reiterate and hit the questions for the kids and all that. Defensively, I talk about having a lot of coverages, but it really doesn't add a ton to our installs because, like I said, it's mostly variations off of our other coverages. So we've pretty much essentially gone to more of a match coverage and our man type stuff, depending on where they're going to line up. But I find it more and more difficult these days as far as man coverage goes to just be chasing guys and lock up. You get picked all day long. Offensive coordinators are pretty good at drawing up that type of stuff. So anyways, defensively, we start with just our base as far as the front. You know, we have our wide, we have our tight, and we have our base as far as where our D linemen are lining up, and we have stacks off of that, whether our stack backers are going to stack on the tackles or be outside or inside. So it's just our base, you know, our wide, tight, and base alignment, and then our gaps from there is day one for us, which, you know, at that point, very basic gaps, just going where you're lined up at. Then day two, up in the front, we start to get to the stunts and everything. Day 1 and 2 in the secondary, I try and stay this, like our cover one, our man, and then our 3 variations for the whole first week of camp and coverage, so that we can, you know, like you're talking about, get really good at one thing. And coverage wise. But then day 3, day 4, the end of camp for us defensively is our blitzing and all that type of stuff. And then we get into our coverages that are only going to be certain opponents, or, you know, our prevent coverages, stuff like that.
Interesting stuff there. Coach Brusso, some thoughts on that?
Sure. Obviously, you guys going 2-a-days probably helps with this, but how do you help kids who are, you know, going both ways, for example? How do you help them retain all that, maximize that, and not present it in an overwhelming fashion for them? Because offensively, air raid can be very complicated just with the amount of variations you can have off of one thing. You mentioned variations on defense too. So how do you help them not get confused and keep all that straight?
Yeah, another really good question, especially just, you know, with the time constraints that we get at the high school level. In that 2-week camp period, the good thing there is you know, I'm commuting from Prescott Valley up to Camp Verde. My couple of my other coaches are teachers as well, so they're not in school yet. We've got the ability to be there from 8 to 4 all day. So instead of like practice, we're home, you know, we get a couple 10 minutes of questions the next day before practice. We've got that time built in. We're up there 8 to 10 hours during those 2-a-days that week. You know, the boys, a lot of them will stick around and get the questions done then. But we've got, like I said before, my coaches are willing to put in the time. So we're willing to stay extra. If it's guys need defense on the board, we'll stay. All my assistants got keys to my classroom, our locker room. So, you know, if it's offensive guys and the rest of us got to get out of there, they'll stay. It just depends on what they need. But another big one is I can't talk about Coach Buck enough. And again, his experience, he does a great job. His install is part of that. What I kind of left out there, we get into, you know, we'll do 10 minutes a day as far as team screens, or all of this one pass play. So we're 10 minutes on the same route combo. So then it's like, all right, this kid that's struggling here, maybe we had planned to do team screens today, and instead we're going to go over let's say our chevron concepts for the 10 minutes instead, because we're like, okay, screens are okay. Our receivers here are struggling with the chevron concept. So we'll just scrap that. We're really good at just flipping the script and being like, all right, we got to work on this right now. This is what is the necessity. We'll work it in there. But, you know, like I said, it's tough to get that extra time. So it's going to be all about what you as a coach and your assistants are willing to do extra, and how much extra the kids are willing to put in and stay and get on the board and stuff.
Really good stuff there, Coach. Next question, moving on here a little bit. What do you think are the most important aspects of your strength conditioning program, and in terms of establishing your program, and what were things that you valued in terms of strength conditioning and getting your team ready to compete at such a high level?
Yeah, I just believe championships are won in the off season, in the weight room, in the off season, the strength and conditioning. So, you know, we're doing it year round. My thing is the variation of different movements. I think you can't just be like, all right, we got an 8-week cycle and it's just the same. When we finish 8 weeks, we'll check our maxes again, but we're just going to go back to the same cycle over and over again. You have to vary what types of lift you're doing. So like right now, my guys are in a cycle that's very, you know, I would say a lot of hypertrophy, but is very technique wise. We're doing all kinds of different types of squats and different types of clean and shoulder press movements and all that type of stuff to work the technique for the big lifts, the power clean, the back squat, the bench press, all those things. Our next cycle after the 8 weeks is going to be building that pure strength off of that. We'll have our breathing squat cycle where, essentially they're doing one set of 20 squats. They can't rack until they've done 20, just like the pure strength phase there. And then we get into the summer and we do a little bit of both, and we're doing our strength or our speed and acceleration stuff there. So I think biggest things there is the consistency and the variation, having a little bit of everything. You cannot, and always analyzing it and growing it. Like I remember you getting into the feed the cat stuff when I was at the end of that spring semester there with you, and it's something we hadn't done yet there. So being able to look and see is what you're doing working, first of all, and then take that. But like I said, the biggest thing is the consistency and the variations for me. You can't just get hyper focused when it comes to strength and conditioning and say there's one cycle to do in the weight room, there's one type of speed and acceleration training to do, and we're going to do it at this times of the year, and we're never going to stop and evaluate if it needs to change or if it's even working.
Great stuff there. Coach Russo?
I like that. Kind of related to, variations there, and then stuff you've mentioned in terms of staff and whatnot. You said you have 6 or 7 guys, so this is kind of a two-parter. Is that just varsity coaches, or is that throughout all your levels? And then, Coach Collette, forgive me, this might be jumping the gun, but how do you structure your lower levels at a smaller school like that, and then tie that into, the year-round stuff, the training, and all that?
Yeah, no, actually, pretty easy to get that second answer with us. It's but as far as the staff, the 6 or 7 that's across the board. So the answer to this question ties in for both of them really. We basically I have a head JV coach, and then and he's also a varsity assistant, and then I have my other 5 assistants, and basically we have 2 of those assistants that JV will practice on their own for the most part, most days of the week for the first at least hour of the practice. And then they come back with us because this is, my numbers are what they are across the board. It's not JV varsity. We have our numbers for our football program. There's no freshman JV varsity. It's our program. And then there's just guys that don't play as much on Friday night that we send to JV games. That's really where we're at there, or guys that aren't going to be able to play on Friday nights yet. So basically, my JV head coach and a couple of my assistants work with the JV squad on maybe offense one day and defense the other day, while we are through our individual and group work on offense and defense on the varsity end. So we have our, Coach Jorgensen with the line, Coach Buck with quarterbacks, running backs, myself with the receivers, and so on. And then our other assistants are down with the JV. And then basically second half of practice, now our current JV head coach is the one that is running the older level of our youth program. So he's got to leave at the end of practice and go coach down there. And then we get our assistants back, and our JV guys are basically, most of them are not even thirds on the varsity depth chart, but they are guys that are our scout team, and they're going to go, we're just there numbers wise. They can't have an entire JV practice for 2 hours while we do, or we wouldn't be able to have any team stuff or 7-on-7 and stuff like that. So as far as it goes in the off season, it's one program throughout. So these are the same guys right now. I've got about 15 to 20 that aren't in other sports that are coming up to the weight room. And it's a solid mix of guys that played JV for me last year, guys that played varsity for me, and a solid mix of guys that will be a little bit of both this year as well. So
have you found that pairing like that has benefited your younger kids, especially just being pushed and around those older players?
Oh, absolutely. And we always give our option at the end of the JV season. We always give the option to those guys, you can check your pads in now, or usually it's 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how deep we're going to go in playoffs. You guys can check your pads in now, or you can stay out with us. Continue to be scout team guys, continue to learn both offense and defense. And we're always, again, we're all relational coaches, so they know where we're coming from in the first place. And it's always we really encourage you to stay out, but no hard feelings. And it's not going to have any bearing on your, your playing time next year if you choose to check in your equipment at this point. So we always give them that opportunity. Most of them are going to stay out, and they usually are better for it, and they're more prepared for varsity the next year. But just throughout the board, when we come down to your house for the 7-ons in the summer, half of my guys most of the time are guys that aren't going to see any playing time at the varsity level on Friday nights for us. We just do everything together. We get who we've got in the summer, and we want to go compete, period. And the boys do too. They don't care that they might be 14 and a foot shorter than some of the guys they want to go compete. And that's one thing I've seen from all my guys across the board is they do want to compete, and that has benefited us greatly with this. So the all levels together is something I've kind of always wanted anyway. And I really have not seen at least anything significantly that puts us at a disadvantage. I think it's all been advantageous for us to have them all together.
Coach, I know in working with you, you were always very big on creating those relationships and those bonds with the kids, which I certainly think is indicative of the culture you guys have established. How do you go about teaching character and leadership to your players?
Yeah, I think it's all got to come from example, really, and we're not perfect. I'm not perfect by any means. I make my mistakes, and I think that's a big part of building character with your players. Myself and my staff, we have to be accountable when we do make mistakes. When we do slip up in certain things, and being able to be vulnerable like that allows the kids to see, there's nothing wrong with being like that. There's nothing wrong with being accountable. There's nothing wrong with having high character. And I think when you build that relationship, then it's as simple as I'm not the type I'm going to go be who I'm going to be when I'm at home with my family, when I'm with my wife, when we're at our, coaches celebration, whatever. I'm going to be the same person throughout. And once you build that relationship and you do that, you grow their character through your leadership. And again, character doesn't mean you're perfect. Character means you're able to be accountable when you do make mistakes. Apologize when you do something wrong, try and fix things or do better the next time, not continue to make those same mistakes. And I think that's really where the kids grow, is being able to see it's not about we don't make mistakes and we're perfect. That's not character. Character is being able to overcome those or doing better the next time and things like that. So, leading by example, one, and again, I think you guys do it. I think we did it over there. Character matters. Everybody's doing that. That's a big one. But I think that's also one of those things that should really be supplemental, because I think it's different maybe at the college level, the different levels you go to. But we're talking about high school kids. We're talking about, the future generations for us. And while winning matters, the biggest thing that matters is these kids, we set them up. We support their parents, we support their teachers, we support their employers, we support whoever else it is that's impacting their life, and making sure that these kids end up being able to contribute to our community and our society, and are basically the type of people that we can be proud of and say, I had a part in them growing up that way.
Love it, Coach. Love it. That's always has been one of my favorite aspects of coaching. And certainly I think one of those is having a staff, which definitely sounds like you have, that are all on the same page where everybody's kind of buying. And the other thing I think is important about that is, just like in life, different people gravitate towards different kids and different people. So I think it's interesting to have as many coaches with differing personalities and perspectives and experiences as possible, because maybe they connect with a kid that another coach doesn't, or what have you. I think that's something that's really, really important, to have a staff that's varied in that regard. So, Coach Brusso, some thoughts on character and leadership education?
Well, I just enjoy listening. I appreciate that. It seems like everyone on your staff is on board with it, and going in the same direction, which I think is huge. And then it just sounds like you guys are real and authentic, and just treat them like young men, and just bond and connect through that way. So I appreciate that. I like listening to that.
Appreciate that, Coach.
This question here that we're going to talk about today is, how do you go about grading your process? And what I mean by that is, how do you assess your program? When do you assess your program? Maybe areas of need, things you want to get better at, things you did well that you want to continue. But how do you go about grading your process? Not your outcomes, but your process.
Right. No, actually, but one of the things I want to do is get better at that part. As far as when, I try and do it as fresh to the end of the season, but also not, we're not trying to do it directly after the last game, but where things are fresh on the mind. And my big ways are, mainly just getting together with my other coaches. Little bit of film. I know you do a lot as far as film goes after the season. Um, and I would like to do more on that end. But my biggest thing is more so I want to hear from my coaches. I want to hear first and foremost, transparently what. Let's talk about me as the leader of this program this season. Practices, everything. Talk to me. What do I need to do better? What do you think we need to change? What did you guys like? What do we want to build off of? All those types of things. And then each of them individually too. But going back to just everything we've kind of talked about today, I think it all comes down to the staff being on the same page there. And if we can be on the same page as far as each other, then we can talk about the team and be on the same page as far as evaluating, like you said, the process there. Like, okay, what about our process didn't work? And if we just make sure we've aired any grievances, cleared the air as far as like, things that needed to be said or thought that needed to be said or, wanted to be said, wanted to be heard about this, that, or the other thing over the course of the season between each other personally, then we can be like, okay, now let's be on the same page. What about our process needs to change? What about it was good? And so on. But I really don't have much more of an answer for that one because I want to do better at it. But my biggest thing, first of all, is just basically end of the year staff meeting, basically evaluations, but I prefer to do them as a whole staff together instead of one-on-ones and stuff like that. So
Interesting perspective on that. Definitely enjoy hearing all that stuff. Well, want to take a second, say thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. I know I learned a lot and excited to see the continued growth of the Camp Verde squad as you guys have done such a fantastic job. Really excited to see what you do in 2A this upcoming season. And I'll give it over to Coach Brusso if you want to give us our last word for the evening.
Sure. Appreciate being on, Coach. Thank you. Enjoyed learning, just what you guys are all about and how you guys are doing things. Keep swinging the sword down there. But look forward to, this upcoming season. Hopefully you guys have a good spring, summer, fall camp, and then hopefully we'll see you over summer at some of the 7-ons. But good luck to you guys and really appreciate it.
appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on, and we'll see you down there at your place this summer for sure.
Thank you. Encourage you guys, remember, like and subscribe. Next week we'll have another guest on, and we're excited to continue growing the show. So have a good night.